The Prophecy of Schorl by J.M. Hearn. Chapter 1. Worlds Apart. The key clicked in the lock and footsteps faded. The stifling silence that seeped into the room was a stark contrast to the yelling and jostling and clattering of only a few moments before. Tally threw herself down upon her bed, her screwed-up fists hammering her pillow, her body rigid with pent-up rage. The warm evening sunlight made the dusty air sparkle as it hit a battered old paint box between folds of patchwork quilt. Tally had rescued it from a pile of unwanted belongings on her grand's kitchen table the day of the funeral. "You may take one thing," her stepmother had said, preparing a black bin bag to receive the rejects. All that remained of Grand's life lay heaped up on the table before them. A pair of wire-rimmed spectacles peeping from their hand-embroidered case, dog-eared copies of the Reader's Digest, a coaster set embossed with mother-of-pearl dragonflies, some copper-coloured pennies that Tally did not recognise, knitting needles stabbed through a big ball of tawny-coloured wool, white cotton handkerchiefs lace-bordered with the initials DTH neatly stitched in each corner, and a figurine, a laughing girl with long golden hair and a swirling red gown, and a bluebird clasped between slender porcelain fingers. Tally's hand had hovered over this for a moment, until she spied beneath the handkerchiefs the rusty corner of an old metal box. On opening the lid, a rainbow palette of brush-worn pigment blocks revealed themselves beneath charcoal pencils of various lengths and an array of silk-bristled paintbrushes. The name Talitha Hoomkin was etched in scratchy letters into the underside of the lid. Her mother's name. Tally shut the lid hastily and scooped up the prize lest her stepmother should suddenly declare its multiple contents beyond the rules she had set. But she was busy tutting her disapproval and beginning to sweep the littered table clean. Dorothea was such a hoarder. Just tat. Worthless tat. That had been such a tough day, saying goodbye to Gran. Memories had flooded Tally's mind. Sugary, melt-in-your-mouth biscuits, Gran's all-encompassing arms and expanse of cushiony knee, and most of all her stories. Such stories of castles and rainbows and faraway lands, and Tally vowed as she watched her Gran descend back to the earth that she would paint a picture full of those stories to remember her by. That is how it began. A secret pleasure to while away the endless hours of solitary confinement when another mysterious rule was broken or trespass made. There was no paper, but there were walls, blank white expanses concealed by the cast-off furniture which filled the room. The emptiness was waiting to be brightened by form and colour, a final gift from Gran. The first charcoal line she had drawn in the corner behind the dressing table had seemed so permanent, yet the stones they formed, one on top of the other, were no more real than the imaginary wall that built itself out of Tally's head. It rose steadily behind the dressing table drawers, and then brushstrokes of green moss lichen, tiny lilac flowers and weedy ferns sprang out from between the great grey stones. They gasped the stuffy air of the bedroom and strained towards the bars of light that filtered through the lead-paned windows of the old Victorian rectory which held Tally in its high-ceilinged grip. Soon the stones had started to form themselves into an arch behind the dressing table mirror, vaulting towards the keystone. Here, directly behind the mirror's centre, carved into the keystone, an indistinct image appeared. It was worn by the ravages of time and weather, or perhaps blunt charcoal, a phoenix or a griffin, or maybe just the outstretched wings of a great eagle ready for flight. And filling the archway to its very peak was a plain wooden door of deep ochre, held fast by rusty wrought-iron hinges and a ring-handled latch. Beyond the wall, brightly coloured butterflies twirled and spiralled upwards, their colourful wings merged into a distant rainbow that arced across blue-grey mountain shadows towards the hazy form of a castle which teetered precariously on a ragged cliff-top. The sketch lines that Tally had begun to draw suggested vertiginous drops and wheeling turreted towers which threatened to peep over the dressing-table mirror frame. In some lights the castle seemed to float, suspended in violet air. In others, it took on the tumbling lines of a majestic ruin, jabbing and dragging the skyline into definition. But how could this place exist without someone to see it all, to smell the little violets, touch the cold, hard stones, to turn the ring-handled latch? And so, one day, with great effort, Tally had inched forward the tall, narrow wardrobe, enough to sketch the profile of a girl just like Gran's porcelain figurine. Masses of golden curls cascading over her shoulders, long lashes, high cheekbones, and the prettiest cherry lips to match her scarlet gown, a princess fit to grace any of Gran's fantastical tales. Hearing her stepmother clanging pots and pans in the kitchen below, Tally sat up, wiping away her tears, and unearthed the paint box from the folds of the quilt. She opened the rusty lid and traced the spidery letters of her mother's name. She had a little time before the light faded completely and dinner would interrupt, if she was allowed dinner, of course. The castle needed arrow-slit eyes and colour to bring it back to life, and steps carved into the plummeting cliffs it balanced precariously upon. She took the glass of water from her bedside cabinet, chose a broad-tipped brush and set to work, mixing shades and tones of light and dark. Lost in the soul of the castle as it formed beneath her brushstrokes, Tally did not hear the footsteps along the landing or the click of the latch lifting on her bedroom door. Tally? Caught unaware, she leapt back from the wall and the paintbrush clattered noisily to the floor. Her father's moonlight face popped round the door and Tally let out a sigh of relief. "What are you doing back there? Have you lost something?" "Not looking for Narnia," he joked. Tally slid out from behind the wardrobe and sidestepped the skewed dressing table, hoping her father had not noticed the patterns of form rising across the wall in the twilight. He was carrying a tray and, after pushing the door to with his foot, made his way to the bed where he sat down and waited for Tally to join him. Tally came across the room, hoping the focus on her movement would keep her father distracted. "Tally, Valerie is very upset. She tells me that you disobeyed her again today, that you were gone for hours, that you had nothing to say when you returned." Valerie's words echoed in Tally's head. "Damn insolence! I won't have it! Not so much of a word of apology! I've been worried sick! Your father will hear about this. Let's see what he has to say about it." "I only went to the woods, and there was a hare. You should have seen it, Dad. So beautiful, like the one Mum painted. And I followed it until it disappeared. I tried to tell Valerie. I wanted to say something, explain, but she was shouting, and the words just got tangled, all mushed up in my head. I'm sorry, Dad." Her father's face softened. "It's not me you should be saying sorry to. You know how nervous Valerie gets about looking after you. You don't have to make it so hard for her, Tally. And she is finding it particularly difficult at the moment." He sighed and held out his hand. "We need to talk, properly. I know I've been busy since we moved, and I know you miss your Gran, but soon you're going to have a new and important role in the family, and you will need to set a good example." As the words melted through the growing darkness in the room, Tally began to understand her father's meaning. "You are going to be a big sister, Tally." Horror-struck, Tally recoiled. Valerie was going to have a baby. Valerie was going to be a proper mum with her own baby. Valerie was making a new family, and it didn't include her. "Please come and sit down, Tally." There was clearly more. "We want the best for you, but you've got to want the best for yourself. You don't seem to want to take part in our efforts. Your teachers have said the same, slipping behind with your homework, daydreaming in class, never joining in. Your form teacher is very concerned that you haven't made any friends." How could she tell Dad that it all seemed so pointless? The conversations about makeup and boys, the quadratic equations, chemical reactions, none of that would bring Gran back, or Mum. She sat down gingerly on the edge of the bed in the growing gloom. Her father took her hand and began again, more hesitantly this time. "We have a lot to talk about. Valerie and I have talked a lot about how we can help you to be happier with life and get more out of it. And with Valerie feeling so unwell at the moment and me at work all hours, we both feel we aren't doing a very good job of supporting you." This seemed hopeful. "You need to be having fun, enjoying new challenges and adventures, getting the most out of every day." This certainly sounded appealing, but how? "I know how much you loved your Gran. She left us some money, quite a lot actually. She would have wanted you to be happy and do well at school." Her father was racing now, and his eyes pleading. "So we've decided to enrol you in a very good independent school. It has excellent facilities, an amazing library, acres of playing fields, its own theatre, recording studio, stables." His words were tumbling along like a stream train going full tilt. "They have their own chef who changes the menu every day, and vegetable gardens where you grow their own produce. And the boarding facilities are like home from home. Well, better." Tally shot to her feet again, sending the old paint box behind her crashing to the floor, its contents spilling across the floorboards and rolling under her bed. "Dad, no! You can't send me away! I will be good! I will be better! I promise I will try harder not to upset Valerie! I don't mean to upset her! I don't mean it!" The agitation in her voice unsettled her father, and he rose to his feet and moved to the door. "It's decided, Tally. Your new uniform has already been delivered. Valerie is so kindly sewing your name labels on downstairs. You'll start next week." He turned abruptly and left the room, taking the last shred of light from the landing with him. Tally sat down on the edge of the bed in the twilight gloom and sobbed. As her eyes grew accustomed to the growing darkness, Tally saw the wobbly lines of brushes and pencils through her tears. There were pieces of the shattered ceramic palette everywhere. Its colourful contents, dulled by the darkness, were scattered across the floor, and something was glinting in the light from the landing that crept under her door. She dropped to her knees, reaching down towards the upturned paint box, and touched the glinting thing that protruded from beneath it. It was smooth as air, but hard and cold to touch. Another gift being passed down the generations? A jet black prism, attached to a tangled leather loop. A pendant. Perhaps it was a talisman, and Gran had not left her after all.